Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. We are going to kick off shortly, but before we do, we're talking about wellness and at work today, and I thought, why not kick things off with a bit of an icebreaker? You know me, whenever I've got panelists, instead of just talking, however much I love to talk, I think it's fair enough for me to ask the panelists some questions. So I wanted to kick off by asking these lovely panelists I've got, as you all trickle into the link, what actually recharges you? What fills your cup? Let's say you've had a busy day, it's been crazy, and there's the one go-to thing that you know will just fill up that cup and recharge you. So, Graeme, I'll kick you off first. What is that thing for you?
It's usually playing with my dog Maggie, a little black Labrador. She's not so little anymore,
I was
but
going to say.
I just loved how she is always in the present moment and always energetic and enthusiastic about life.
Oh, that is so lovely. And they always say, right? It's just having a pet, a dog, or just someone that you can kind of confide in. That energy is very different to a human being that sometimes comes with a lot of other emotions and things that might be happening in their life. So, oh, that's lovely. And Angela, what about you? Is there anything in particular that really fills up that cup after a long day or busy day?
Yeah, I actually have really gotten into cooking as a way of like unwinding and just having a really awesome meal at the end is very satisfying. So that's probably my little recharge moment.
I love that. Is there any particular kind of cuisine, or are we talking about the
Just whatever I'm craving on the
I
day.
love it. I love it. Have you been experimenting with recipes as well, or has it just been,
Yeah,
whatever the gets, I'm gonna make it work?
I tend not to follow recipes, which is frustrating for my friends who, if they ever have a good meal with me, they know that it's never replicable. It's one and done.
It's like my grandma, she cooks with her heart, all right? So there's no measurements when you're cooking with your heart. It's just one of them. Oh, that's fantastic. I can see that we've got quite a few people that have jumped onto the link, and I know that we've got quite a jam-packed session today. So I thank you so much for participating in another icebreaker with me. Hopefully it wasn't too crazy and too painful. I did mention it to Angela and Graeme before we jumped on, so I could have scared them, but they still managed to push through and come in. So what I'll do is I will kick things off. I can see that somebody's mentioned that we've got a bit of an echo, so we'll see what we can do around that. Hopefully, it's nothing too bad, but I'll tweak some of the sounds on my end once I go off. It might be me because I've been the one speaking the most. All right, well. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we are going to be talking about wellness at work. We did a similar webinar or a session, a year or a couple of years ago, and it was a great session that we had where a lot of people weighed in and spoke about different sides of the aisle, and they spoke about what they're experiencing at work. And also, we had kind of a generational divide in that conversation as well, which was very interesting to get down to. And at that time, we had Graeme on that specific session, and it was great to hear about resilience and all those aspects of when we're looking at burnout and wellness. And I'm so happy that we have Angela here today as well. But I'll get into their background. I just wanted to say welcome, everyone. If you're tuning in the morning, good morning. If it's the afternoon, good afternoon. I'm coming in from New Zealand, so it's afternoon over here, and it's the sun's coming out, which is good. My name is Sanam. You may be wondering who's speaking at you, basically. I'm the Employment Counsel here at Employment Hero, and I have been eating, living, and breathing employment law for years now. And New Zealand employment law is just what I live in consistently. So some of the stuff we'll be talking about today, I have a little bit of expertise. But I am delighted to be joined by our panelists who you did hear what makes them, recharge at the end of a busy day. And today we have amazing experts. We've got Graeme Cowan, who's a team resilience speaker. And then we also have Dr. Angela Lim as well, who's the CEO and co-founder of Clearhead. It is a modern day EAP provider. And I'll get into, rather than me doing introductions, because I am the worst at laying everything out and making you sound amazing, I would love for Angela to kick off first and just let us know a little bit about you and what your background is. Clearhead is something I've come across throughout my career, and it's just really lovely to have you here today, Angela. So if you could give us a bit about yourself.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me, Sanam. My name is Angela. I am a medical doctor by training, and really sort of this mission to kind of improve access to mental health support got me started on this journey with Clearhead, which we started back in 2018. And Clearhead's mission is to ensure people can get accessible mental health support. We have these long wait times, 6 months long in the public system. We have the highest youth suicide rates in New Zealand, and there's so much more that we can do with technology. And it's been a real pleasure to partner with Employment Hero as well to be their EAP provider of choice in New Zealand. So thank you for having me, and I'll pass it on to Graeme.
Oh, brilliant. All right, Graeme, lay it all out. Tell us what you're all about.
Yeah, lovely to join you today. I'm a team resilience author and speaker. I'm also a founding board director of Are You OK? And host of the Caring CEO podcast, which has been nominated #2 worldwide in Best 50 Workplace Mental Health Podcasts, which is great. I also have my own lived experience with depression. I was out of work for 5 years with a really bad episode. I then wrote a series of books and then met Gavin Larkin in 2009 and helped to launch the very first Are You OK back then. And I served as a director for 13 years, but have stepped down now. But yeah, very proud of what that's become.
That's fantastic. And Graeme, just from I guess your experience, I know that I did say this in one of our chats behind the camera, when we met. It was it's so interesting because you bring this perspective of somebody that's actually gone through it, and even in your book as well, you talk about it, and it's very fascinating to hear it from somebody that's actually been through the cycle of it and actually has been back from the brink, right? Oh, that's fantastic. So, if everyone's ready, I think we could kick things off and we could probably get started. Does that sound good? Oh, brilliant. Okay, so I will get things started. The first thing I wanted to say is that with housekeeping, I just wanted to let everyone know that we have a Q&A session. These panelists are here for you. They're here to answer your questions. If you're needing specific legal advice, this is probably not the panelists that will turn around and give you the specific legal advice, but we do have a HR advisory service as well. So if you want, just message in the Q&A and you can tap into that. And then aside from that, just know that this is a recorded session. So just sit back, grab a tea, coffee, if you're in New Zealand, something a little bit stiffer, whatever you want to do, and we can get the day started with the session. And what I wanted to kick things off with first is really understanding a little bit about what led you into this specific space. I know, Angela, you mentioned obviously, medical doctor by trade, but what has actually brought you into this space, and with Clearhead, what kind of ignited that passion in you? And like I said, I've been seeing you kind of doing this for a while now, so it's been amazing to see the journey that you've taken.
Thank you, Sanam. Yeah, basically for me, I was always someone who couldn't just see a problem and let it be. And as I indicated, it was kind of shocking to me as I started working in the hospital and seeing that we had the highest youth suicide rates. But then when people wanted to get help, they have to wait 6 months to get help, and something wasn't matching up. And so I thought that there could be a better way. And, when we started back in 2018, even then we were really interested in the role of AI to kind of bridge that gap between the workforce shortage and the need that's out there. So we've been able to kind of build this really holistic system that helps people be guided on the help that they need. It's available 24/7. So instead of waiting 6 months to be seen, they could be seen in 2 days by a psychologist, and that includes seeing someone in person. So that was the first thing, is we use technology to try and address the barriers to getting help in a more timely manner. Then the next thing was around cost. And so that's where we sort of went down the EAP route, where we are like, if we partner with employers, then people don't have to worry about, can I afford this therapy session or not? And it's been really great to kind of see some of that change over time, which where basically employers have started to put their money where their mouth is in terms of thinking about their people's well-being and what supports is needed to do that. And so so that's kind of where that journey has started for us.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And you're so right. It it is a situation where a lot of times employees just feel like that help is so out of reach that they just think that, look, if I try to go down this path, one, it's not as accessible, two, it might take months for me to get there. And a lot of times when you're dealing with, EAP and you're dealing with things that they do stem from the workplace as well, and you're kind of sitting in there and festering in that as an employee and as an employer. So if there is a way to move forward, then it's a great option. And I think that what you're doing is fantastic, Angela, and it's just been so cool, like I said, to see the journey. And Graeme, I know that you mentioned a little bit about kind of dealing with your own situations around depression and just being in the thick of it. Is that what kind of led you to doing what you're doing, or was there a pivotal moment in your career or life?
Yeah, there was. I was out of work for 5 years and never thought that I'd work again. And I remember being very, very sorry for myself and saying, why me, why me, in my mother's kitchen up at Foster on the New South Wales North Coast. And she looked me in the eye with one of those really piercing mother stares and said, I believe you'll use this experience to help other people. And it was no overnight recovery, but it did really start a path of starting to exercise, reconnect with family and friends, and then deciding to write my first book, Back from the Brink. And the interesting thing was, over that 5 years, I'd tried lots of the evidence-based stuff to overcome my depression, but for whatever reason, it didn't really work. So it was a real combination of things. And, when you write a book, you go from I think a me-centric to a we-centric. And then that book then led to me meeting Gavin Larkin, the founder of Are You OK? And just when I heard about it, I knew that it would be important. I knew that I wouldn't have made it without the support of my parents. So we launched the first one in 2009 with really no money and no employees. And it's really taken off to be really quite a movement now across Australia, certainly, but I'm sure also in New Zealand, you've seen some of that as well. Part of the realization of long-term recovery was about learning about what was important to my self-care. And it was really three elements. The first was vitality, which is our physical health. So exercise, good sleep, good nutrition, intimacy, which is really promoting caring and supportive relationships at work and at home. And finally, prosperity, which is my contribution, health or career well-being. And, that's about having a sense of purpose and using your strengths and being grateful for what you've had. And so each week I plan what I do in each of those three categories. And I'm finding that's like a inoculation. It keeps me in the green zone most of the time.
That's brilliant. And it's such a good nugget of information there. So that whole idea around vitality, intimacy, you said, and prosperity, is that right, Graeme?
That's right. So the acronym is VIP. And so,
I love it.
so I told people you have to act like a VIP, which doesn't mean acting like a wanker. It means topping up well-being in each of those three cups of well-being.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm sure we'll get into more of that as well as the conversation goes, because we're definitely looking at practical tips and steps that you can do right now to hit the ground running. We love doing sessions and webinars like this at Employment Hero. So one of the key aspects that we're going to be talking about is as part of this kind of wellness at work session is that we are dealing with our annual jobs report that came out. So Employment Hero did do an annual jobs report. We did do a wellbeing report, I believe a couple of years ago, I think it was. Sophia, you're probably screaming in the back going, no, it was last year. But when we did do it, it brought a lot out about people in terms of rates of burnout and things like that. And funnily enough, this annual jobs report brought out a lot there as well when it came to what people are facing on a day-to-day basis, whether it's having to work more and do more jobs, or whether it's to have a higher workload. And one of the things that we saw around that jobs report was that 40% of workers say that they'd rather work less today to enjoy a healthier balance between work and having a life outside of work and just their lifestyle. So they're really prioritizing well-being over ambition. Now, if you're wondering about the jobs report and you're frantic, you're thinking, I haven't seen it, don't worry, we will be sending it out post-webinar, so don't worry about that. We will refer to it a few times, but we will send everything out after the session. So with that said, with that 40% number, that's quite a lot. If you're thinking about it, there's a lot of people there that are saying that, look, we don't really want that high-powered career in terms of our prosperity, like what Graeme mentioned. It looks a lot different because we have other buckets that we might need to fill as well. So I wanted to ask Angela first, what's the major shift that you've kind of noticed with organizations approaching mental health over the recent years? Are you seeing that organizations are having to kind of keep up with trends like this or changes that are happening?
Yeah. So, we started back in 2018, and I would say back then, mental health really was the poor cousin where people didn't really pay much attention to. Then we started to see a shift basically just post-COVID, sort of that 2020, 2021 period where people could really see that their employees are being affected by their mental health challenges post-COVID. And so then there was this reactive approach of what do we do? Then as that sort of progressed, sort of in that 22, 23 period, we started to see a much tighter labor market, and where basically employees really had the opportunity to go where they want to go. And that was when we were starting to see the trend where employees, especially younger employees, were choosing to go to work for employers that really pay more than a lip service for well-being. And so that's kind of where we started to see that sort of that peak in terms of like thinking about supporting employee well-being in the context of the benefits of reduction in employee turnover. People feel more productive, more loyal, happier, all that kind of stuff, and they were definitely coping better. What's been interesting, obviously, the last year, obviously with the economic downturn, employees might not have as much bargaining power anymore compared to the years before. But where we started to see is legislation coming in. So starting in Australia, but won't be surprising to see this sort of flow through New Zealand soon. But this idea around psychosocial risk management, where as governments across the world struggle to manage the well-being of their population, they're going to put more of that onus into employers' hands. So there'll be more sticks rather than carrots to drive it. But regardless of it all, I think they do make a difference. And I can give you a couple of stats to think about. We don't do this as well in New Zealand, but if I quote you some data from Australia, Safe Work Australia have basically found that if an individual is struggling for mental health, that's mainly due to the workplace, they often will take about 37 working weeks off work. That's about 5 times more than the median of any other health and safety related incidents. And then in terms of employees getting compensated, the average is about 65,000, which is 4 times more than the median. And basically, mental health conditions have made up about 10% of serious workers' claims, which is doubled since the last from 10 years ago. So regardless of whether you think about it from the carrot or the stick, the reality is mental health is becoming more and more a prevalent part of the workplace, and how you think to manage it will allow the company to either succeed and flourish or sort of struggle in reaching its potential.
Yeah, and it is that prevalence, isn't it? It's not necessarily that there is a lot of noise coming from one area. It's the fact that across the board in both countries, we're seeing it in Australia and New Zealand and around the world, where you're seeing workforces dealing with this consistently. And it's because of the fact that we're kind of outside of COVID now, and the ways of working have changed, the ways of thinking about work have changed, and the approach to work has changed. And it's become a bit of an adjustment. And I would say there's a lot, like you said as well, Angela, around outside of work, just the financial pressures that you're facing, all of that piling onto an employee while they're also working and dealing with all of the things that are happening at work. It's a lot to take on. And with that, Graeme, is there anything in particular that you've noticed? I know that you go into a lot of organizations and speak quite regularly. So have you seen how maybe there's been a shift in how they've approached mental health over the last few years?
Yeah, it certainly had a much higher profile, as Angela outlined. And there is, I guess, more sophistication coming to it. Traditionally, there's like 3 ways that we can help improve mental health. One is called tertiary, which is, fixing after people after they've crashed and burned. And that's the worst and slowest, but we still need something there. The secondary is about training people on, to be more resilient and that type of thing. And then the third one is the primary or proactive. And what this is about is understanding what the root causes are in terms of what's causing the stress. Is it too high a workload, unclear job descriptions, bullying, harassment, and then really addressing that sometimes even before that's come to pass. And this is, some of the really profound implications will follow soon. So psychosocial risk, everyone thinks, sounds really confusing, but I just invite people to think of it as harmful work stress. That's what it is. And Safe Work of Australia have identified 14 root causes of that harmful work stress. So if you know that your biggest cause is unclear job descriptions, you can proactively address that. And I think that's really where it's heading. It's still so far behind, I can't tell you. I spoke at a construction company a few months back, and they went through physical health and physical accidents, and they identified for 10 years what were the top 5 contributors to injuries, and they could see that all the trends going up, coming down. It was a real science. But then they asked me to just explain what psychosocial risk is and what to do about it. So, we've got a long way to go to reach the sophistication of physical accidents.
Yes, and it's fascinating because in this day and age with I guess the digital world and people working from home, I remember when I worked in advisory and people would work from home, I'd always get, oh, but what hazards do they have in their house? Obviously we've set up the chair ergonomically and we've done all of these things, but it goes so much more beyond that. When you're looking at people working remote, their work bleeds into their personal life. You've got so much crossover that happens, and to your point as well, that those job descriptions and those position descriptions, they can vary so much, and they can just become so broad in terms of what the employee is picking up day to day. I mean, in New Zealand, a lot of times it is the actions that happen in the employment relationship more so than what is written on paper. So if you've got employees chopping and changing and doing different types of work, and their now workload is getting broader and broader and broader, it really does create all these psychosocial risks in the workplace that a lot of people don't realize are being created. So we'll definitely get into that when we're discussing, kind of the next topic. But for now, I'll bring it back. Angela, specifically, I wanted to talk to you about, what you're seeing as the most significant trend at the moment. I know that you had a couple of slides as well that you wanted to share with us, but what was, other than what you've discussed, is there anything in particular, or if you can pinpoint a couple of them, what it would be?
Yeah, absolutely. If we can bring the slides up. So we sort of looked at the last 12 months basically. So I think the main thing to pick up here is that workplace used to be a much smaller proportion of what gets reported. So we actually, that should say 500 plus companies. What we really sort of see is that workplace is continuing to grow as the issue that people reach out for support via their EAP provider. And part of it is just a bit more trust in using what an employer provides. Previously, people would have stigma associated with it. And the other is just that education, as you said, as psychosocial risk becomes much more prevalent in the workplace in terms of how it's communicated and educated. People are starting to identify, oh, actually, what I'm experiencing is not normal. It is because of this reason. And so that's kind of one of the biggest trends that we've seen as workplace becoming more and more an issue that people feel impacted by for their mental health. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that basically we're starting to also see people feeling much more comfortable again with using tools to reach out for help earlier. And so that's kind of what I mentioned before around, when we were toying around with AI in the beginning. It's about thinking about the fact that not everyone, in fact, most people see seeking professional help as the last resort. So how can you get that help, that education much earlier? And so we started to see this trend where people are not waiting till they're in crisis mode, but actually reaching out for help much earlier, which is great. And then if you look at the final slide that I have on there, you'll see that unfortunately, the last few years continue to take a toll on us, and that we sort of benchmark these scores out of 100. And the scores continue to trend down. There's a little bit of variance depending on the size of the company, and there are actually different factors that drive positive and poor mental well-being in different size companies, but that's sort of like where we're seeing is we still continue to need to do more is where we are at. And if you're feeling that your employees are more tired, maybe much more anxious, all these things, you're not seeing things. This is what we're seeing at an aggregate level as well.
Wow, there's some interesting and fascinating numbers, Angela. Like it's crazy to think that I think we do have a bit of a divide, right? There's a lot of employers, I'm sure, out there that are going, no, it's okay, it's fine. We're not really seeing these as being an issue. But then the from the surveys that you've done and the data that you've collected, it's crazy to see that it's not getting any better, and we're not. It's not just a moment. It wasn't just a COVID related thing. We're now well out of it, and it's a lot bigger than that, and it's a lot more socioeconomic, it's political. There's just so many other factors to it as well. And Graeme, to kind of understand exactly what is happening in the workplace, how are employee expectations around mental health and well-being shaping the culture in the workplace? Have you seen anything in particular of what employees might be expecting or asking for? I know Angela touched on a few things around, what might be the stressor points or what might kick off the conversation, but anything that you've been seeing?
Yeah, I think the real progress is when you make it part of what we're already doing. If you bring in something extra, it's complicated, it's difficult. And where I've seen some really good examples, I work with a group in AB a little while back, and had a very, very good leader, but he could tell that they were, he could feel the stress levels rising, energies dropped. And so what he did was decide to hold a specific session around that and identify what were their moods. And he was a really good leader. The average mood was 7.5 out of 10 in the green zone, but there were 7 that were 5 and below. And as part of the session, they had me share my story, but they also had one of their employees share their story. And this guy was a elite athlete. He'd done the Hawaiian full triathlon. And people were very surprised when he shared about 7 years before he'd been through it. And then that really opened up discussions that people were talking about having trouble sleeping, not being able to switch off, not making enough of the remote working. And as a group, they've got 150 people. Each of the managers got them and asked, what can we do that will make a difference? And the management group then came back, regrouped, looked at all the things, and nominated 3 things that they thought would make a difference. So one of those was for Dave to have a webinar every 2 weeks, Q&A. And the change that was going on was so dramatic. He really said, if I know the answer and I can tell you, I'll tell you. If I know the answer but I can't tell you, I can't tell you. But if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that. And anyway, just that one thing really brought down the stress level substantially. They also decided to have what they call pens down, more computer down Friday, where everyone left at 3 o'clock and did something for their own well-being. And then the other thing they did was to have, with those small meetings, they decided to have walking meetings.
Mhm.
So they did those three things over 9 months, and the mood went up and the stress came down. And so that I think is the future, where we have in real time how people are feeling, if they're feeling engaged, an idea of what's causing it, and so it can be addressed really early before a crisis occurs.
Oh, that is fantastic. And it it's incredible what little, like you said, Graeme, because change is something that's not received well. People are not usually receptive to it, but just adding in these little things. And I am a person that loves to take an outdoor meeting. If you see me on a call in summer, if we ever do a webinar towards the end of this year, I will definitely be sitting in the sun when it is out. And I completely understand even just the 3 p.m. cutoff, and just giving them that extra time as well can make a massive difference on mental health. And to what Angela mentioned, earlier on when we were chatting, it's just around this whole perspective that these things are actually going to help with retention. They're going to help with loyalty and the fact that you're not going to have attrition issues and all of these. But it's so hard to see that as an employer. I speak a lot about the employer's perspective because I've worked a lot in the industry, and I can see how employers would feel like this is just an extra thing to add. But if it means not having to retrain, to rehire, not having a workforce that is just always feeling like this place is toxic and I shouldn't be here, and also just making sure that your employees are feeling healthy, happy to come into work, that is a huge game changer for any workplace. And it's unfortunate that there are employers that don't see it. But obviously in Australia, we've headed in the direction where they have to see it with psychosocial compliance that they've got to do. And then in New Zealand, we're still catching up, but we've got a health and safety, regulations happening there. So I guess to both of you, before we move on to the next one, I know that actually what I might do is I might carry on to the next topic, because I don't want us to have, a little amount of time for the question. So if we can move to employer obligations and really understanding what's happening around that. Another area that I thought would be great to discuss, well, it's not actually me, it's Bernie and Sophia in the background that put this all together and make this happen. So thank you guys. Is that 38% of people reported working extra hours in that annual jobs report. That is wild from everyone that we surveyed. And like I said, that's going to be sent out to everybody, as well as these slides as well. I know people have been asking, and the recording, but 38% of people are saying that they are needing to do extra hours just to keep up. And this is really suggesting that there is a workload issue happening here. And what we did touch on it, Graeme mentioned it, and rightfully so, psychosocial hazards. I really wanted people to understand, just from an employment law perspective, kind of what that means. So when we're talking about psychosocial hazards, we're talking about excessive or unmanageable, workplaces and workloads, unrealistic deadlines and time pressures. And those are some of the things that are considered as psychosocial hazards. That's not everything under the umbrella, but this is what ties into that 38%. And I wanted to kick things off, Angela, with you first, just around what psychosocial hazards are you seeing most often right now in workplaces? Is there anything that you're seeing from the data that's coming through about what employees might be experiencing? And then how do you believe employers should respond? Is there anything that they should do? I'm guessing you're going to say, don't use Clearhead.
Look, I think maybe just so that everyone's on the same page, what is a psychosocial hazard? It's simply in the context of the workplace. It's there are three broad categories they can fall under. One is workplace interactions or behavior. So the most prominent one you can think of is, for example, if there's bullying going on. The second is the design or how the work is managed. So that's some of the stuff that you've mentioned, Sanam, which is around workload. Um, and then the third is the work environment, whether people feel safe to speak up, whether they feel leadership actually values well-being, whether they feel rewarded in the work that they do. So those are what are, as you said, a broad list of hazards. In terms of what we've seen continue to be like the top 3 hazards through our data. The first is work demands. So it basically matches what you've just said, which is that workload continues to grow and has grown in the last 12 months. The second is around role clarity, which Graeme briefly touched upon. And that comes with often when there's too much work, not enough people, you end up doing a lot more stuff than you're expected. And then there's this mismatch around, okay, what are you actually being judged upon, especially when you come for performance reviews and stuff like that. And all of that obviously results in people having to work longer. So those are the top 3 things that we see. And what do we then see as top 3 protective factors? Really, it is around then when things are getting hard, if you have a good culture, if you have a good team, that is a real protective factor in terms of being able to ask for support, in terms of being able to collaborate to manage the work. And so what we want to see, and the other thing as well as autonomy. So being able to make the call on how to prioritize your work, make the call on how the work should be done. Those things matter a lot. But one of the other thing I want to say is the role of leadership, because you just cannot do it all. And if you don't have the resource to, it really comes down to leadership to be able to be very clear on your priorities so that you're not wasting people's time. You're not burning them out by saying, oh, this is our strategy, this is what you need to do. And they spent 3 months doing a project that then when they finally deliver it, you at leadership say, oh, we changed our mind, or that's not important anymore. And it's very demoralizing for someone to work very hard and then have that be suddenly changed, or considered not a priority anymore. That type of decision making should really be happening right up front. And it's the role of the leader to model that.
Yeah, and to that point as well, Angela, what you mentioned around autonomy also being around what is a priority and prioritization, and really understanding what's the road ahead of you in terms of the next few months, maybe in the role, and not having that chopped and changed is so important. But more so as well, understanding that your junior employees are people that don't understand priorities necessarily the same as other senior employees in the business is very critical, and that does get lost a lot. I know that when employers run performance management processes and they try to go down that path, the first thing that comes up is I wasn't supported, or I wasn't really I didn't understand what my expectations were or what my actual job description was, because that might be missing a lot of times, or the role might have broadened so much. So it is really important to understand that you do have a lot of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people working in the business as well. Don't ruin that. They have a whole long career ahead of them to face the realities of the workplace, but in jest. But no, it is really important to make sure that you are nurturing that side as well. And Graeme, to that, is there anything in particular that you're seeing in terms of psychosocial hazards that are cropping up more and more? Maybe that might be relating to depression in the workplace, or people feeling like they can't really be themselves at work. And how do you think employers should be responding to that, especially in this in this year compared to maybe 6 years ago?
I'd just like to dovetail first off what Angela said about the manager or the leader's role.
Mm.
And last year, I posted on LinkedIn that the best way to boost employees' mental health is to give them a good manager. And I also linked to a Scientific American study of the same name. And it went absolutely nuts. It's up now to 3 million views and thousands of responses. And I guess the overwhelming sentiment is people 100% agree with that. And so having a good manager who understands what's going on, who checks to see if people are on the right track, who provides encouragement with little wins, is such a huge contributor to a great place. The other root causes I'm hearing, particularly for groups in retail facing or public facing areas, is just this horrible bullying,
Yeah.
often verbally, but also physically from
Yeah.
people in a shop or a aged care facility or whatever. And so, organizations are looking at ways that they need to address that. Um, when I think the real transformation comes with changes in leadership behavior. And it's what I call a great leaders care framework. And so that involves three things. First of all, self-care, increasing my resilience for uncertain times. Crew care, which is building psychologically safe and resilient teams. And red zone care, being able to identify early and address it and provide expert guide to people like Angela's service, and other things like their GP or whatever. But when managers, it's seen as being part of the way they do work, and they're measured by that, that makes a huge difference. I was speaking last week with a former colleague from Carney, which is a management consulting firm I worked in, and he ended up being a very senior guy at Telstra. He reported directly to David Thodey at the time, and they really championed customer experience, the net promoter score. And he was telling me that his team had been very important. They'd hit all their financial metrics, but they didn't hit their customer experience metrics. And so they got no bonus for that year. And if you want to send a powerful message, that's one way to do it. But I could easily see why it could be the employee experience. You've got to deliver the results, but is the team still ready to keep going and do better work in the year ahead? This is sort of the proactive approach to really addressing that harmful stress.
And do you feel that what might be happening, Graeme, and this might be outside of the scope of what you're seeing, but do you feel in with leadership specifically that there are people maybe transitioning into the role or moving into leadership positions without really truly understanding the entire a holistic approach to leadership and really understanding all the aspects of it and what's actually involved in leadership? It's mostly just there for the title. How does that sound?
Unfortunately, that happens all too often. Someone who's really good technically gets promoted to overseeing everyone. And when you move from being a technical person to a manager, it's not a new position, it's a new career.
Yes.
Your mindset has got to be so different and be much more outward focused than, inward focused when you're just working on a specific project. And, just really adapting a we care and also a we're great mindset, not teams where it's an I'm great mindset. I'm great, but you're not that great. To really,
You're not the one.
but to really consider that we're going to be much stronger if we're a we, both in performance and in mental health, if we do have that mindset.
This is why lawyers love the proverbial we. We anytime we send an email, it's always a we. We never want to be attacked as an I. Oh no, this is fantastic, and I can feel so many nuggets of information coming through. I know people are in the Q&A as well, and they are asking some questions. So I'll keep us moving because we do have a little bit of time left, but I want to cover off as much as I can. I might just stick this question specifically, Angela, to you around the duty of care when we're looking at duty of care in the workplace in practical terms. Is there anything that you've seen? We always say, you've got to be good as an employer. It's always good to be great, all of those things. But what does good and great actually look like? Have you seen anything in particular?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think there's just a simple graphic that we can bring up on the slide. In the context of psychosocial risk management, really it's four things you have to do. The first is you have to identify the hazards. What's actually affecting your workplace specifically? Your workplace might not have any bullying issues, but it might have a workload issue. And then from there, once you understand what the problem is, you can then take steps to actually address it and then review whether the steps that you have taken is effective. And to kind of keep it simple, where most of us are at this stage is, I'll quote Albert Einstein: if I was given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it. And so, if there's one thing that you take away, is really asking yourself as a leader, whether you have the systems in place to identify the hazards that exist in your workplace. So if you don't do anything at this point other than to try and figure out how do you hear from your people, and it doesn't have to be, platforms like Clearhead do provide tools to allow you to give your employees ability to check in a stigma-free way, anonymously, and still aggregate the data. But if you kind of go, I just want to do something, even starting with focus groups, giving people a space to just share and then take from there, that's a great first step. And I'll sort of, I'll pass it back to you, Sanam.
Yeah, and it is that thing of a lot of times, when I worked in advisory or just in private practice, employers would come to me and they would say, how do we start? How do we have the conversation? You do it in your toolbox meetings all the time, where people are chatting about other things. You might be, having a yarn in the break room or something like that. But why not move that kind of conversation and shift it towards health and safety in the workplace? It's really not that hard to do, to just get a bit of a sense check on what people are feeling, and like what Graeme said earlier, it's about creating that space for people to understand that they are okay to be heard, and that it is one of those environments where you're not going to just close the door on any of the conversations. But it can be done quite easily in the workplace. It doesn't have to be as onerous as employers think it is. And it usually stems from, like Graeme mentioned, all the construction companies have all of the health and safety in place when it comes to physical issues that can come up. It's just branching off and stemming from that virtually. So we'll keep things moving. And what I might do is pull some of the questions that we were going to talk about in this section, and maybe get to topic 3, because I know that we are headed down the path of getting close to the marker for us to wrap this up. So I want to make sure we get to the questions, but I thought, why not get into kind of the practical frameworks, where we've spoken a little bit about the practical side of things and different roadmaps that you can embed, and then we've looked at the VIP method, all of those things as well. But I thought, why not actually see what you can walk away with, because we've got 2 experts here, people that have been through it, have been seeing what's happening in the industry and many industries, and hopefully you can walk away feeling like you've got a little bit of an approach, whether it's a holistic approach or it's a resilient strategy that you can implement in your workplace. So I'll kick off with you, Angela, if I can, just because we've got another slide that we can show, and it's around practical frameworks from what I understand. But is there anything in particular that you've kind of seen when it comes to models that leaders can specifically use to create psychological safety or some sort of resilience in their teams?
I think Graeme wanted to kind of talk about the leadership and resilience piece, so I might leave that question for him. But I'm happy to, if you bring up my slide, and actually Graeme referenced that earlier in the chat as well, about thinking about this from a tertiary, secondary, and primary perspective. So the tertiary bit is the bit that is probably the least effective, but the one that most people do, because it's easy. It's like, oh, I have an EAP provider. Oh, I've outsourced the problem. And you look, it's good to be able to have experts in place. You want to make sure the people that you partner with can solve this problem for you in terms of they have the right expertise. And so this really is in the context of, look, an employee has come to you now. They've told you they're burnt out. What do you do? At the very least, you're just trying to minimize the damage that is now that has already occurred, and in this case, it's making sure that they're provided one-to-one therapy support, for example, through your EAP, making sure that if you as a manager or leader or HR person feel that you don't know how to approach this conversation in a way that's going to be helpful for both the employee and the organization, give your EAP provider a call. So really, this often is just you're reacting to an individual already struggling. Secondary in this case is when you know that, for example, okay, I work in retail, and yes, there seems to continue to be very abusive customers. How do I educate my employees to not take that emotional burden on? So, what are programs or learning tools that they can learn to manage their emotional I guess, resilience in the context of an environment that you already know will have an impact on their impact negatively on their mental health. And so obviously, you want to look at, like tools like Clearhead will provide that learning tools, but you might have other learning and development courses that you have that you can make sure that your employees are aware of and they complete. And then finally, the third thing is that primary piece, which is that data piece, which I was saying to you before, which is if you do anything, you want to start with being able to identify the hazards. So what tools are you currently using? Most companies do have engagement surveys. That's one starting point. We don't necessarily recommend them because they're not quite fit for purpose for this. But starting with something that you do have, like engagement surveys or focus groups, is a great starting point. And then obviously looking at tools that are a bit more specific for psychosocial hazards identifications is really important. But I'll pass on to Graeme to kind of share in the context of leadership what can be done there.
Yeah, and I'll just go back, Angela, to the slide you talked before about the 4 parts of psychosocial risk management, and just to give an answer how that can go wrong. And this was a case in Australia earlier this year by Cobar Management. And basically, they were in the mining industry, and the 2 accountants had to report to a finance person in Switzerland. So there was really weird hours and all this sort of stuff. They were getting very, very stressed by this, and they reported it, and nothing happened, and they reported nothing happened. And then they took it to the regulator. And the regulator went in and not just looked at the financial accountants, but also the whole organization. And they ended up having to go to an enforceable expenditure of $1 million to help sort things out. So looking at what the risks were, what they've done, what they haven't done. Now, if I speak with consultants that work in that space, if they had done that like a year before, it would have cost them like 100,000, 150 rather than the whole 1 million. So this is happening right now where just 2 stressed people could lead to a $1 million enforceable undertaking. So with practical tips for leaders, and having focus groups can be really fantastic, but also just having a simple thing like your weekly meeting. How's everyone feeling this week? Who's in the green zone or the amber zone? And you need a leader to be really authentic about that and share what's honestly going on from them. But you straight away get an idea if there may be someone struggling. On your one-on-ones, just to ask people, what is one thing we could change that would substantially make your job easier? Just one thing, and going around to the various people to see if there are ones that happen, there are things that are common, and looking at approaching it that way, but also just checking in, working around and saying, how things going? You talk about this being a priority for this year, for this week, what's happening? So, of course, having a thorough approach is really, really fantastic, but you make great progress just by doing some simple things that allow people to share what's making their job much harder than it should be.
And it honestly, Graeme, if I can be completely honest, shock horror. The first time I went into a one-to-one where I was sitting as more of like a lawyer kind of going in, thinking, oh no, nobody even asked my client at the time I was representing an employee how they're doing, what's going on. And this wasn't necessarily a one-to-one, but it was the first time I really experienced it. The employee was actually off because of the fact that they felt like they'd been disadvantaged, bullied, and everything in the workplace, and the manager didn't even bother to say, how are you feeling? If you've not been feeling too well, obviously, about the situation. I truly believe that a lot of times in the employment relationship, it seems to be that the relationship gets dehumanized, because when you're dealing with a person outside of the workplace, like a family member or a friend, you wouldn't approach the situation that way usually, and you'd actually have a conversation with them first before battling the work and going into what you're actually meant to do. So very, very true, and very fascinating that a lot of that gets lost in the day-to-day of work. And I get why everybody's got deadlines and things to do, but it doesn't mean that we've got to lose that side of being a human and actually helping nurture the relationship, because it is a relationship at the end of the day, you know. So I'll move on to another part, Graeme, and I thought maybe we can still touch on it around how to make well-being sustainable for employees. I know that you spoke about, you know, obviously introducing these little things. It doesn't have to be anything arduous or crazy that you introduce, but is there anything that you've seen that makes well-being really sustainable when you're looking at it from a leadership perspective?
One thing about having huge impact very quickly is when a leader walks the talk. So he doesn't just talk about the importance of well-being. And I had this happen. I ran a session for a group at Macquarie Bank, and the leader decided, you know, one thing he wanted to commit to was running in the botanical gardens in Sydney at lunchtime. And he basically did that. In most weeks, he probably 3 times out of not do that actual event. And it led to other people saying, well, if he can do it, I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to go out and read a novel, or I'm going to do something for my own well-being at lunchtime. So that can have a huge impact. And there's also research that shows that if a leader does walk the talk, it has massive flow-on effects for the health of the team, but also the engagement of the team, and also the commitment to the team and the organization. They want to stay longer if they work in that sort of environment. So there's incredible, you know, tangible benefits in doing this, and you know, it's a message I'm very passionate about sharing.
Oh no, I love it. And I remember the first time I ever saw a reporting partner actually eating lunch in the break room in the kitchen area. And I thought, wow, we can do that. We can actually take a lunch, we can take a break. And because, you know, it had just never been a thing that anybody ever did, you know, when I worked as a law grad. So I was just absolutely amazed that this is completely normal. But it was you know, I'd make a light of it now, but it truly was the fact that a leader was actually showing up and showing, you know, like you said, actually talking what they actually walking what they talk, and actually showing up and following through, rather than saying that no, everyone can take breaks, but then sitting in their office just working through their lunches. So, and I just wanted to, because I know we still want to get through to the Q&A component. So I thought, why not kind of leave with the last question that we had, which was around what's one piece of advice for future-proofing culture and around wellness. And I wanted to turn to you first, Angela, looking ahead and looking at how organizations are embedding wellness into their everyday business strategy. It's obviously become a huge thing. We're talking about culture a lot, and it's not just an initiative anymore. It seems to be something that's quite embedded. So is there any advice that you have for future-proofing culture when it comes to wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. If you put up my last slide, basically, this slide is just about the data piece, but if you move on to the next piece, basically what I really want to say about culture is not what you say, it's what you do. And by ensuring that you think about how you put in systems in place to make sure that that information then flows on for the individual, you as an organization, it means that people are getting the support that they need. And if people get meaningful support, they're more likely to then tell other people about the meaningful support. And so but however, if they got something that was unhelpful, they will also tell other people that it was unhelpful. And so then you now have a culture where people feel, oh, what's the point of speaking up? Or what's the point of asking for help? People don't listen when I say something, or people don't, when I ask for help, the help's not even useful. And so it's really important that if you truly believe as a leader in creating a safe space in your workplace, to create a space where well-being is prioritized, then your actions have to reflect that. And that's all your employees are looking at. And sometimes it might be, it takes time. Sometimes you have to keep showing up and keep showing that this is how you're going to be before your employee trusts that this is real and not like sort of a 1 month fad because it's Mental Health Awareness Week, for example. So yeah, that's kind of my suggestion around thinking about what systems do you have in place that matches what you're telling your employees that you care about.
Yeah, and so true, Angela, because you mentioned the engagement surveys and everything. I went to I went to a conference through employment here a while ago, and somebody from Gallup asked, how many here? It had all the big names. You've got Westpac, ANZ, everyone's in the room, and the managing director asked everyone, how many of you do engagement surveys? And everybody confidently put their hands up. How many of you actually follow through with the engagement survey? Everybody hands it down. So it is very important to actually follow through, and your data does mean something, but it only means something if you actually implement change and make things better for your employees. And to that effect, Graeme, before we move on to the Q&A component, what about you? Is there any one specific piece of advice that you have for kind of future-proofing culture around wellness in the workplace?
Yeah, this, I guess, primarily applies to managers, but everyone can be involved. And in a team, you should be really thinking about three things. Care about belonging. Belonging and connectedness is a fundamental human need. We need this since tribal days. The second thing is leading with psychological safety, and that's where people can be their authentic self, where they can make suggestions, where they can object to things they don't agree with. And then finally, growing together. And so this is a mindset where we encourage people to try new things, take intelligent risks to ultimately help address some of the issues that we're having. So everyone can play a role with those about, care about belonging, leading with psychological safety, and growing together.
Yeah, and that growing together component as well, Graeme, like you mentioned, it is about taking those risks and
Mm.
pushing the boundaries a little bit, but also nurturing that push from leadership is very important. It's one thing to be like, look, I want you to take some risks, and then all of a sudden every idea gets shut down, or so it is really taking it that extra step further, isn't it? And so if we want, I reckon, to the panelists, Graeme, Angela, maybe we move to the Q&A component if you are happy with that. Oh, perfect. All right, so we'll move into the Q&A. We did get a fair few amount of questions. The first one isn't a question. I actually got a little bit emotional reading it, to be honest, Graeme. There was a person that messaged through saying that when they were experiencing domestic violence, they often received emails from you and want to say thank you so much for the support and the emails that they received. So you're making a massive impact. Are you okay? Is huge. When I found out I was on a webinar with you the first time, I was like, wow, it's like a celebrity. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. And then to another question, I can probably answer this, but I think we'll stick to some of the ones that are more tailored, maybe outside of compliance specifically around the employment law, and more to do with how to actually tackle these situations in the workplace, because the compliance side doesn't actually help you with that necessarily. So let's have a look. So people are asking if there's any kind of training in particular that is recommended. I'm sure Angela, Graeme, you both have specific trainings maybe that you might suggest for resilience and leadership. If there is anything in particular, then let me know and I can always flick it through to them. But was there anything that you've come across?
Yeah, look, there is something. We've got a program called We Care Manager,
Yeah.
and it's a 50-minute course which trains managers how to identify problems and take action. And then it's followed by 12 nudge videos. And so Fujitsu, for example, used it in Australia. It's gone to APAC, and they're now taking it globally. A quick, simple way to go quite a bit deeper than Are You OK can go.
Mm, okay. And Angela, is there anything in particular that you've kind of seen?
In terms of training, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really just comes down specifically to what's going on in the organization, rather than sort of a blanket rule would be our suggestion. We tend to kind of say work with the organization to see what's the underlying issue and then kind of get training that's responsive to that, rather than sort of like one like recommended training.
I do think that a lot of times the blanket approach is to just, yes, give all different kinds, I mean, give all the same training, don't make it bespoke, but your business will have different pain points and your business will have different risks and different hazards. And it is really important to tailor these things specifically to your leaders, your managers, and then also to the business and what people may be experiencing. I mean, I always thought that the signs when you walked into the bank that said, please don't yell at our staff, I was thinking, who would ever do that? But people do it, and they deal with a completely different situation than someone that might be working in the corporate sector. So absolutely different. One of the things that came up from somebody was around leaders that are transitioning into the role from outside of the organization. What are your recommendations? Angela, I might kick off with you first for building team capacity and really understanding how to create that trust and an environment where employees would expect the business to actually nurture them. Is there anything in particular that you would suggest, or any? I think we've touched on it in terms of how they can approach it, but if you want to reiterate any of them.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of further detail that's on there is around, especially in the context of change and in the context of restructuring. And so, really, when you talk about building trust, you need to think about it not just in the context of what you do in terms of the people who are going to be restructured out. The people who stay are also observing you. And so they will see, oh, this person was just let go with no notice, or no acknowledgement. Oh, I could be in that position. So if you want to build trust, you start by showing the people who are most vulnerable how you treat them, because then those who stay will then will sort of take that as, okay, this is an employer that cares. This is an employer that has thought about how they can support the employee as best as possible. And that's why when Airbnb sort of the CEO, he went viral when he sort of took this his own initiative to try and get as many of his employees rehired during the COVID era, where he had to, I think, let go something like 90% of his staff. So that's the best way to kind of think about building trust, especially if you're a new leader. You cannot underestimate how much you need to communicate. Just reiterate why you're doing what you're doing, all that kind of stuff. People don't like to find out things last minute. They want to be brought along the journey, even if it means you telling them that, okay, we don't have all the information right now, but I'm sharing with you what I can share with you right now. And I'll tell you more when I can tell you more. And that's kind of the thing to consider in the context of change, in the context of new leadership, in the context of trust.
And, in New Zealand, a lot of things that, a lot of times employers don't realize that good faith actually underpins our key legislation. So it is this overarching requirement to actually be transparent and discuss things with your employees and communicate effectively. And it is something that is the backbone of the employment relationship. And a lot of times that gets lost in the conversation when you're running processes. Graeme, I'd love for you to answer that question that I directed to Angela, but there was another one that came in, and I really like this one, and I wanted to see if I could direct it to you, because it is directed towards you. It was somebody asking, in hindsight, and I love this, was there any specific triggers that you saw that led to the way that you felt when you kind of were at that brink point? Was there anything in that were identifying signs, or anything that maybe they could take away for their workplace as well?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. So do you mean when I understood what led to recovery, or what I could have done differently to avoid the situation?
So I guess a bit of what actually led to the burnout, the depression, and then maybe what you could have done differently, what people could implement, or what they might see in the workplace as a red flag. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, one of the big things was the great tech crash. I was leading a recruitment company that focused in that brand new e-commerce area. This is back in 2000. And then there was a big tech crash. And so the business really collapsed.
Mm.
And, I tried to keep up a positive front, tried to come up with ideas, but I could have done it so much better by being honest with the team I was there and say, what ideas do we have to address this? I felt I had to come up with the ideas. And so as a leader, that would be certainly something I would always do. This is the reality. What are the options? What do you think is the best out of these things we've talked about? Let's give it a shot. And so you are soliciting input, but more importantly, you're straight away taking action with the most of the agreement from the people with you.
Oh, perfect. And do you feel like in those scenarios where you have this expectation put on you, could it be that even if the expectation was something that you are meant to do, there are just some points in life where like you said, the certain buckets might not be full, and you may be lacking in certain other areas, which is trickling into the workplace? Have you kind of seen that as well, Graeme, or could you relate to it?
Yeah, definitely. And I've got a self-care snapshot, which really asks 5 questions in each of those 5 areas. And I'm very happy to send it and share it. And it also has a poster about how to support someone who's struggling. So yeah, very happy to share those tools, which I use every week.
Brilliant.
And I also dropped it in a couple of the questions that we've already answered, where they're asking about, what are the resources available to how to have that conversation with someone who is struggling, which the EH team will send through post-webinar.
Mm. And I'll do one more question. I really like this question. So I'm sorry, we've got so many, but this one I really liked as well. I'll direct it to you first, Angela, because we've spoken a lot about people being in management positions and leadership and everything like that. But somebody rightfully asked, what about if it's just little old me in the team? How can I uplift the well-being culture in the workplace? And what can I do in terms of my part, not for myself, but actually for my team and for the business, which I think is absolutely lovely to the person that asked the question.
Yeah, and look, that's the challenge, is that there are at times limitations to what you can do, but still don't underestimate what you can do. Often, and I've seen it even in my own company, the people who really make a difference in the culture are not people in management. And you by through your influence, the circle of influence you have, that has a ripple effect. And obviously, there still needs to be the leadership side of things to, amplify that and not crush whatever you're doing. But yeah, do what you can, and you will be surprised. People are observing, people are watching, and it has a positive ripple effect.
And Graeme, is there anything that you want to add to that before we kind of start looking at wrapping things up?
Yeah, I guess model or model the behavior you want to see. So, for yourself, you take responsibility for your own well-being and you do things around that. When you're in a meeting, you are really curious when someone, offers an idea. Be curious, ask questions to really try and understand it. And also to suggest things. We've been talking about this for, 6 months. How about we try this? How about we give it a shot? So to be honest, a good manager would just love that. Absolutely love it. So yeah, model what you want to see.
And and the reason, just taking it that extra step further, the reason why they would love it, because it also ultimately it is going to help drive the team forward, and it shifts a lot of the work in terms of the manager micromanaging or having to be involved in every little bit, onto a bit of the employees to take their own initiative and to put their hand up and to contribute in the workplace, which is fantastic. It's just how it's received.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, which is like, if you're not sure, then beyond modeling what you want to see, but also if you think you want to influence up, rather than do it in a really confrontational way and say, oh, we never do X, or why don't you do this? Ask coaching questions and to get the person that you're trying to influence up to think about some of the areas that you would like to see improvement on.
Okay, so note to self, Angela, don't say, why do we get paid so little? How do we change this? All right, well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much to the both of you. Angela, Graeme, you have been absolutely wonderful and imparted so many nuggets of wisdom onto everyone. They've asked so many questions as well, and I'm sure everybody would love to get the post-webinar materials, or, whether it's the slides. Graeme, if you've got anything you want to send through as well. But thank you so much for being here, for participating in the discussion, for listening to my screechy voice. I really appreciate it. And just because I know Bernie will say something to me if I don't bring it up, a survey will pop up at the end of the session, at the end of the webinar. Please let us know if you liked it, if you didn't like it, if there was something else that you were looking for. We absolutely appreciate your feedback. It helps us make these a lot better and a lot more palatable for everyone. And like I said, we've got post-webinar material that we'll be sending through to you, which are resources after today's session. We also will have a link to the recording sent out as well, and you'll have the slides there as well. So thank you so much to you, Graeme, to Angela. I really appreciate it, and we really can't wait to have you on the next time. I'm sure that there's going to be a next time, but thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everyone for being here as well.
Thanks, Sanam, and thanks everyone. Love to be with you. Lovely.
All right, have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.